Michael Carter pulled his tattered Marine Corps jacket tighter around his body, shielding himself from the brutal December cold. The neon glow of a nearby diner cast long shadows on the pavement, illuminating his gaunt face and hollow eyes. His boots, worn from years of service and months of hardship, scraped against the concrete as he took slow, hesitant steps toward the entrance. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, a sharp, twisting pain that he had learned to endure. But tonight, desperation pushed him beyond pride. It wasn't supposed to be this way. He had enlisted straight out of high school, eager to serve his country, to be part of something greater than himself. 2 tours in Afghanistan had hardened him, tested him, broken him in ways only those who had been in the thick of war could understand. He had seen friends die, had felt the heat of explosions against his skin, had made it home with his body intact, but his mind forever changed. The transition back to civilian life had been brutal. He had tried. God, had he tried. The VA was overloaded, jobs didn't come easy for a man with injuries both seen and unseen, and no amount of willpower could fix a broken system that seemed determined to forget him. His wife had left when the nightmares became too much, when the silence between them grew heavier than words. Without family, without support, without options, he had slipped through the cracks like so many others. He hesitated at the diner's glass door, watching through the frost-lined window as families and couples enjoyed warm meals, laughter, and the comfort of security. His fingers, stiff from the cold, trembled as he reached out. Just a little kindness, just a meal, just a moment of human decency. That was all he needed tonight. He turned instead to a couple stepping out. A middle-aged man in an expensive coat with a woman clinging to his arm, both full and content from their dinner. "Excuse me, sir, ma'am. Sorry to bother you," Michael said, his voice steady but weary. "I haven't eaten today. If you could spare anything." The man barely glanced at him before curling his lip in disgust. "Why don't you get a damn job?" he spat, pulling his wife closer as if Michael's very presence was offensive. She scoffed, rolling her eyes as they pushed past him, their expensive shoes clicking on the pavement. Michael felt the familiar sting of humiliation, the kind that cut deeper than hunger. A few nearby customers paused, glancing at him with similar expressions of disdain, their curiosity mixed with repulsion. Before he could process the rejection, the diner's glass door swung open, and a broad-shouldered man in a pressed uniform stepped out, his face already twisted in irritation. "Hey!" the manager barked. "We don't allow beggars around here." Michael took a step back, hands raised slightly, palms outward in surrender. "I wasn't causing trouble," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I just asked for some help." "You people always got an excuse," the man sneered, crossing his arms. "You think because you wear a military jacket, someone owes you something? Newsflash, buddy. No one cares what you did over there. If you can stand on your feet to ask for handouts, you can stand on your feet to work." Michael felt the words hit him like a physical blow, a sharp and cruel reminder of the reality he lived in. He had fought for this country, bled for it, watched brothers in arms die for it. And yet, here he was, treated like trash by the very people he had once sworn to protect. The humiliation didn't end there. A couple inside the diner laughed, shaking their heads. A man near the door muttered, "Pathetic," under his breath. The final insult came when the manager pulled out his phone and dialed. "I'm calling the cops," he said, voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "You either walk away now, or you leave in cuffs." Michael's throat tightened. He had seen this before. The police wouldn't care that he had done nothing wrong. They'd ask him for ID, realize he had none, and likely throw him in a holding cell overnight. Just another vagrant causing a disturbance. No one would care that he had once been a decorated soldier. No one would ask how a man who had survived war now couldn't even survive a trip to a diner. As the distant sound of sirens echoed down the street, Michael swallowed his pride, turned away, and walked into the cold night, his head bowed. The manager smirked in satisfaction, dusting his hands off like he had just dealt with a nuisance. The customers returned to their meals, comforted by the knowledge that they wouldn't have to see someone like Michael while they ate. But not everyone inside had ignored him. A young woman named Elena, a college student sitting by the window, had recorded the entire exchange on her phone, her fingers shaking with anger. As Michael disappeared into the darkness, she uploaded the video to social media with a single caption: A veteran who fought for this country was just thrown out of a restaurant for being homeless. This is America. She had no idea how quickly the world would see it. The video spread like wildfire. Within hours, it had racked up thousands of shares, then tens of thousands. By the next morning, it was in the millions. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram exploded with outrage. The comments a mix of fury and heartbreak. Disgusting. This man served our country, and this is how we treat him. That manager should be fired. Boycott that place. Someone find this veteran. We need to help him. By noon, news outlets had picked it up. The footage played on national television, accompanied by discussions about the struggles of homeless veterans. Reporters dissected every detail, the sneers of the customers, the cold indifference of the restaurant staff, and most damning of all, the manager's cruel words. The diner's name, once unknown outside its small town, became infamous overnight. But the true firestorm came when the restaurant's response backfired spectacularly. The owner, under pressure, issued a statement. Instead of taking responsibility, he dismissed the incident as a misunderstanding and suggested that Michael was aggressive and making customers uncomfortable. That was the final straw. The public turned with a vengeance. Yelp and Google flooded with one-star reviews. Customers canceled reservations. Protesters began gathering outside the diner, holding up signs that read, "Respect our veterans. No one who served should starve. Homelessness is not a crime." And then the unexpected happened. A local news station tracked Michael down. A reporter found him sheltering under a bridge, wrapped in his thin military jacket, sipping a cup of coffee a kind stranger had given him. The cameras rolled as Michael told his story, not just about that night, but about the years of struggle leading up to it. "I came back from war with nothing but the promise that I'd be taken care of," he said, his voice hoarse from the cold. "That promise was broken. I applied for jobs. I went to the VA. I tried to do everything right. But once you fall, this country doesn't care if you get back up." The interviewer asked him what he thought about the restaurant's response. Michael let out a small, tired laugh. "I fought for their right to say whatever they want. Doesn't mean they're right." By the time the segment aired, Michael's face had become the face of a national reckoning. Donations poured in. The hashtag #sign, Help Michael, trended across platforms, and within 24 hours, enough money had been raised to get him off the streets. But that wasn't enough for the people who had seen his story. They wanted justice. The restaurant continued to spiral. Employees started quitting, unwilling to be associated with a business that had become a national disgrace. Customers stopped coming. Every day, the protests outside grew larger. Then, a man named Mark Reynolds, a retired Army veteran and CEO of a successful private security firm, saw Michael's story, and he made a decision. The next day, he posted a video of his own. "Michael Carter, if you're watching this, I want you to know something. You're not alone. I was where you were once. I know what it's like to feel like you've been thrown away. That's why I built my company, to give men like us a second chance. So here's my offer. A job, a home, a fresh start. No handouts, just respect. Call me." The internet erupted. Within hours, Michael had a phone in his hands, a stranger offering him hope. For the first time in years, he hesitated. Not out of fear, but out of disbelief. Could it really be real? Then, with a deep breath, he dialed the number, and the course of his life changed forever. Michael arrived at the Reynolds Security headquarters 2 days later, still wearing his worn-out Marine jacket, but standing a little straighter than before. The difference was subtle, but it was there. The faint spark of something that had been missing for years. Hope. Mark Reynolds greeted him personally. He was a broad-shouldered man in his late 50s, his salt and pepper beard neatly trimmed, his handshake firm. A scar across his knuckles suggested that he had seen his own share of battles. He studied Michael for a long moment before clapping a hand on his shoulder. "You're not here because someone felt sorry for you," Mark said. "You're here because you deserve better. We take care of our own." For the first time in years, Michael felt seen, not as a burden, not as a problem, but as a man who still had something to offer. The transition wasn't easy. His first days on the job were overwhelming. He was rusty, his reflexes dulled by years of hardship, his mind still haunted by shadows of the past. The security firm specialized in high-risk operations, executive protection, disaster response, and even international contract work. It was a far cry from begging outside a diner. At night, alone in the small apartment the company provided, he doubted himself. Could he really do this? Could he be more than the broken man people had seen in that viral video? But Mark wouldn't let him quit. "I've seen tougher men fall," Mark told him one evening after a brutal training session. "But you got back up. That's what matters." Slowly, Michael began to believe it himself. Within months, he had regained his confidence. His body grew stronger, his mind sharper. He excelled in the field, his military discipline kicking in with every assignment. The same world that had discarded him now respected him again. Not because of charity, but because he had proven himself worthy. While Michael rebuilt his life, the diner that had thrown him out continued to crumble. The protests never stopped. Customers never returned. Employees who had laughed that night had long since quit, their reputations tarnished by association. The owner tried everything: rebranding, a desperate PR campaign, even offering veteran discounts. But the damage was irreversible. 6 months after the incident, the diner shut its doors for good. The building sat vacant for weeks, its once bright neon sign now dark and lifeless. Then something poetic happened. A coalition of veteran advocacy groups, funded partly by donations from the Number Help Michael campaign, bought the property. And they had a plan. The same place where Michael had been humiliated, where he had been treated as worthless, was transformed into something greater: a veterans outreach center. It offered meals to homeless veterans, job training, mental health resources, a place where men and women who had served their country would never be turned away. On the day of the grand opening, Michael stood outside the newly renovated building. Reporters and cameras surrounded him, eager to hear his final thoughts. 6 months ago, he had walked away from this place feeling like nothing. Now, he stood here as a man with purpose. When it was his turn to speak, he stepped forward, cleared his throat, and looked into the crowd. "I was never asking for a handout," he said. "I was asking for respect." A hush fell over the crowd. 6 months ago, I was thrown out of this place like trash. But today, it stands as a home for veterans who deserve better. Not because of pity, but because of justice. The crowd erupted into applause. Mark Reynolds stood beside him, nodding with approval. Elena, the college student who had filmed the original video, wiped away tears. The story had come full circle. Michael Carter, the forgotten veteran who had once been cast aside, was no longer invisible. He was proof that no one was beyond redemption, that justice was real, that sometimes, when people stood together, change was possible. And this time, no one could turn him away.